very lucky to have David Flatman with us today. David is an ex-Bath and England front row and now a commentator for BT Sport and ITV. David, thank you so much for coming in today.
Pleasure.
We had 4 very different but thrilling games over the weekend, but it seems that the World Cup's turned into the Rugby Championship. What do you think's happened there?
I think a couple of the Northern Hemisphere teams, Scotland, Ireland, Wales actually in particular, fronted up really well. Considering what happened to Wales, I think they were fantastic. I think Ireland lost some key players, and we always knew that if they lost a couple of those big boys in the starting 15, they were going to struggle. Scotland, I thought, were just brilliant. In the lead up to the World Cup, I thought they had the best build-up of all. And I thought stylistically they were fantastic and ultimately very unlucky not to go through. And let's face it, they should probably be in the semi-finals. But I think there was just a case of, with England, I think, it didn't happen, it didn't click, but it feels like, South Africa aside, I think there is more of an emphasis. You look at New Zealand, who are the runaway favourites at this stage, there just seems to be more of an emphasis on skill and talent rather than size and power. And that's kind of a general statement, but we haven't got an hour to talk about it. People talk about the All Blacks being comfortable, all the players being comfortable on the ball. What does that mean? Well, we know what it means in terms of catching and passing, but it means that Dane Coles or Owen Franks or Tony Woodcock or Wyatt Crockett, whoever it is, all the front 5, if they come out of a scrum and they're supposed to stay wide, they can just stay there. The All Blacks aren't fighting to get front 5 players out of the way of the ball. So these guys are probably doing less work, frankly, so they're fresher and they can play for 80 minutes. And the whole team is confident to leave these players out wide, because when it arrives in Dane Cole's hands 5 yards from the touchline, or Kieran Reid's hands 5 yards from the touchline, they're brilliant on the ball. They're comfortable on the ball. So all across the field, in that quarter-final against France, the width New Zealand maintained, or able to maintain, because it just didn't matter who was where. Really, just 5 minutes in, France were in pieces. Aerobically, they were in pieces because they were being stretched left to right, left to right, left to right by 15 New Zealand players with the requisite skill level to catch and pass and make ground and retain ball. And I don't think many other teams match that, frankly.
Argentina looked superb against Ireland. What can the home nations take from their style of play?
I think Argentina, I'm a big Argentinian fan because I like meat and wine and scrums. But I think they needed reinventing. And the new coach, Arcadi, he's done that. He's come through Argentinian youth rugby. So he was under-20s coach, I think, with Argentina, under-21s coach. And what he's done is effectively take a team who have a big, strong forward pack and a load of big, strong, sort of densely built guys, and sort of reinvented them. He's brought some young players through and he's given them license to play and really attack. And I think what Argentina always had was physical strength, resilience, passion, and sort of physicality, whatever physicality means. They kind of had that, but they never really looked like carving people up regularly. They now look like that. They've got proper players, Montera in the back row just is a fabulous player. The midfield was just a joy to watch. I know Marcelo Boss was banned for a week, but in the quarter-final against Ireland, their midfield was just gorgeous. It was just a 10, 12, 13 combination. Looked like they'd played together forever. Just proper, natural rugby players. And they're just magnificent to watch. They're the new France.
Well, heartbreak for Scotland against Australia, but have they exposed Australia as a team that is very beatable now?
All the teams are beatable, except New Zealand, unless New Zealand have an off day. I think that the way they played against France were awful, but the way New Zealand played was kind of otherworldly. Scotland have just... I love the way Scotland have played. And have they exposed Australia? Not really. I mean, I think, again, All Blacks aside, everyone is beatable, to a point. I think it's just desperately unlucky. So I commentated on that game, and from 100 yards away up in the stands, that final decision looked about right. And then you start seeing the replays, and Bernard Foley's about to take his kick, and everyone starts, this is getting a bit awkward, and Craig Joubert, the referee's looking at the big screen thinking, this is awkward, I should probably have pulled this back, but protocol says I can't. And ultimately it was a guess at decision time, which was incorrect. He's human. But you put Nigel Owen or Wayne Barnes in that position, and I think they say to hell with protocol. They blow the whistle and say, stop, somebody check that out, because I'm not sure. So Scotland, it's just agonising. But sport is agonising.
Absolutely. Well, South Africa now play New Zealand. What can they do to stop the Kiwis?
They're not going to outplay them, I don't think. They've shown no signs that they're going to attempt to outplay them. They're not a terribly... I mean, after they lost to Japan in round one, maybe it gave them a kick up the backside or whatever you want to call it. But they went back to what South Africans do best, which is battering people. And you look at that pack, that starting pack, and I would say of the starting 8 for the All Blacks, for the Springboks, I would say tight head props aside, whether it's Malherbe or Yanni du Plessis, I would say they've got 7 top-class ball carriers in their position, 7 world-class ball carriers in their respective positions. And I don't think there's another pack that can say that, actually. I'm not even sure the All Blacks can even say that. So what they do is 1 pass or 2 passes away from the breakdown, bang, 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 we're coming at you. And it's about containing them physically and dominating them physically. The All Blacks are very well equipped to deal with that. And when they turn over ball and get ball of their own, I expect them to have too much invention and width and pace for the Springboks to live with ultimately. Wales lived with the Springboks for 78 minutes, but it just told that strength at that last scrum, which pinned Warburton in, freed up that blind side, just brutal. So it's hard to resist, but I think there's no team better placed to do so than the All Blacks.
And in the other semi, you've got Australia versus Argentina. What sort of key battles will take place in that game?
Oh, it's great, isn't it? I mean, you've got the much heralded sort of new age Australian scrum, which it is a decent scrum, but I think we may find out, unless Herrera, the Argentinian tight head, gets retrospectively cited for a little shoulder charge, hope he doesn't, I think you may find that Australian scrum exposed, but frankly I think the Argentinians could expose any scrum. So the Australian team on the back foot is entirely different, as with any team, to the Australian team on the front foot. I would say that against England, they got a lot of front foot ball from set piece, and they looked marvellous. Against Wales, they got a bit less, and they looked a bit less marvellous. And against Scotland, they got very little, and the Scottish pack were fantastic. WP Nell, the South African playing for Scotland, was just fantastic at the weekend. So last weekend, so suddenly they look more and more vulnerable the less front foot ball they get. They're not going to get a lot of front foot ball at the set piece against the Argies. So I think if anyone's got a good chance of beating them, it's Argentina. But Australia have operated on the back foot for generations, frankly. So I can't see it. The romantic in me wants the Argies to do the job, frankly, but I can't see it.
England will go away now and pick up the pieces, and either Stuart Lancaster or someone else will be coach. What should be the first order of business for that person?
Win. I think it's England about a year or 18 months ago. We were wondering sort of who are they, what are they going to become, and then George Ford arrived and Jonathan Joseph arrived, and suddenly we became a team with a really dominant pack, a really dominant set piece, which somehow ceased to operate in the World Cup and the build up to the World Cup. That's a separate conversation. I think lots of very good players. I think Dylan Hartley's absence has surely got something to do with that. We became a team who are really, really threatening in attack. Give us good ball and we'll cut you to pieces. Especially with George Ford at 10. I think Owen Farrell has never been better than since George Ford got the 10 jersey for England. He's stepped up and become better and better and better. But I do think with George Ford there, with Joseph fit, I think when the Wales game arrived in the World Cup pool stages, England missed a trick in not just leaving it as it was and replacing Jonathan Joseph with Slade and saying this is who we've become. We know we can defend, we know we're strong enough, we don't all have to be enormous, but when we get ball on the front foot, we're going to cut you to pieces. England kind of went away from that. I'd love to see them go back to that, because actually there's a lot of talk, even from smug people like me on the telly, who say, perhaps England are a bit too much about size and power and a little bit, perhaps not enough about skill and finesse, but we're good at it. We've got players that can do it. If you pick an England 15, think of Kyle Eastman's at home watching on the telly. Henry Slade watched the World Cup, most of it from the touchline. Same with George Ford. We've got players to go out and do it. I would love to see England pick them. I'd love to see, we mustn't just copy the All Blacks all the time. I'd love to see England do it our way, but saying that, I would love to see England pick the players that the All Blacks coaches would pick were they England coaches.
David, thank you so much.
Cheers.